Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sweat Success. I'm beyond stoked to have our esteemed guest with us today, whose relentlessly driven spirit has really been transforming the lives and enhancing health for the past 2 decades. Starting from her beginnings with a brick and mortar facility, backed by a stellar team whom I've met, they're all awesome. She has now embarked on another truly exciting chapter in her career, assisting other fitness entrepreneurs and businesses in growing their own business, really replicating what she's been doing already with her extraordinary success. Whether you're an up-and-coming trainer, a seasoned veteran seeking to sharpen your competitive edge, our guest will be sharing her invaluable insights on what makes a one-on-one training style fitness business thrive. Okay, we're not talking about group classes here, although she does have that too. We'll explore really the adaptation she's had to make in order to stay ahead of the game, her predictions for the future of the industry, kind of where things are going, and her approach to compensating her incredible team, because I know she's got a stellar team. Now, first, I want to just kick things off with an incredible, powerful quote from her that I've read more than once. From the day we are born until the day we die, we're meant to move. Now, I don't know if that's directly from her, but it is definitely her stuff. Now, I absolutely love that quote. I'm thrilled to share her insights with you all today. Marie Merritt, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited, right? Like beyond excited. It's an honor.
So I want to first just talk a little bit about your journey. I mean, you started when you were young. You're still young, but you were younger, right? We're talking about 2 decades. And you built this, you had this idea for this personal training business. And there's a little bit of, I would say, some resistance, because I talked to some gym owners and they believe in this personal training model that is, 4 trainers or 4 clients at a time with a trainer. There's others that's just group and that's all they do. There's boot camps that go out there and that's all they do. But you've been pretty strong on one-on-one personal training with a brick and mortar facility for the past 2 decades. I mean, you've been doing this for some time, and obviously there's some learned lessons there. So what was it that kind of got you to think, I'm not doing a gym. I'm not going to spend the money on a big box club. Maybe that's not me. That's not where I'm at. I'm just going to dive right into one-on-one training. I'm going to make a business out of this.
I would say from the perspective of most of the gyms who have membership base and they rely on the people to actually choose to get up, to put their clothes on, to go to the gym. Mm-hmm. They don't make their money off of the people who show up. And so if you look at the amount of revenue that these gyms are generating, I looked at that and I was like, ooh, I don't feel good about creating something that would make money by people who aren't benefiting from a service or something that I would offer. I got into the fitness industry really because I saw it as preventative medicine. And so if I was able to help people adapt, change their lifestyle, create healthy behavior patterns using exercise at the time, right? Like that was the tool that I used, exercise and nutritional coaching, to make the changes so that they were healthier. I felt like that was giving them access to preventative medicine that they wouldn't get at a normal, like big box gym that doesn't care about the people who walk through the doors.
So what I'm hearing you say, and I believe this too, from a monetary perspective, is that you have these big box clubs, or even they could be a boutique gym as well. But their revenue, a majority of their revenue is coming from the members that aren't there. So for those of you who are listening who don't look into the details of this, but there are big box clubs. And when I talk about big box, I'm talking, 20, 30, 40,000 square feet and more. And they offer a plethora of services, including personal training. By the way, typically the training at those locations, not all of them, are not as at the level of quality that I would say you might get at a very specific personal training facility like what Marie has. But looking at that, they get their members, and they'll get 4,000 to 5,000 or 6 or even more, 10,000 members at their facility. They rely on them not showing up because it'll beat the crap out of their equipment. And they expect them to continue paying. That's kind of the model. It's like that expectation of them continuing to pay. and you never see them. And typically you don't see that adaptation or that change that Marie's talking about. So Marie, what was it that that got you into fitness in the first place? Like, why did you go down that path? Because it's not an easy journey.
It's not. So I grew up in a household that was inherently full of unhealth, right? Like my family was unhealthy. I saw my mom get sucked into the diet culture where she was constantly yo-yoing up and down. And it wasn't focused on like nourishing your body, moving her body. And I saw that she was in this level of unhealth or constantly sick, and she would go to the doctor. The doctor would like write her a prescription, and they never talked about behavior change, right? And then I have an athletic background. So I go to college and like, oh, I'm going to be a doctor, right? But I'm going to do doctoring differently. And then they get you into the classes, and then like the pharmaceutical reps will come in and talk about, I remember at the time there was one, this is what got my attention, the non-habit forming pain management systems. And I was like, ooh, no. Like this doesn't feel good, right? Yeah. So if I look at the way people have access to health, it's because in the medical industry, and it's a huge industry, right?
It's a business. They have their bottom line they have to hit.
Yeah. And they're driven, the people who make the policies are being funded by pharmaceutical industry. And the only way to really get people on medicine and keep people on medicine is if there's something internally wrong that medicine can immediately address for them without saying, hey, you know what, like you have high blood pressure. If we go through and we make some very deliberate behavior changes, some lifestyle changes, you won't need this medicine, but we make money because of the medicine.
Yeah,
so
it's a sad story that prescription is there not in all cases. Obviously, I know you believe this too. Some people actually need medication.
Some people need it.
Yeah. Because I know you have clients, or at least I know you're kind of like moving away from having clients all the time. But I know that in the past when we've talked, you've had clients who have been on medication and it was a necessity. And you've had other clients who've had medication stacked on another pill, and they keep taking these other pills because the first pill that they took caused another problem. And your job, your focus has been to pull them away from that, get them off of those medications and into a healthier lifestyle.
What is it? I think that a doctor in a private practice, in order to be successful, they may have 7 minutes or less with a patient. You can't reach somebody. You can't generate or spark like an intrinsic motivation to change. If the doctor's like, okay, this is what's going on, they don't really help you understand it. So then you're left to go to Dr. Google to research all of the things, right? Like, so I don't think that doctors are given the capability to spend the time that's necessary to actually help create wellness for people or health for people. And so I think that that's what pushed me into it the most, was I wanted to bridge that gap, right? Like I would create relationships with doctors. And let's say they had a patient who was struggling with a lot of things, and they knew that the medicine on top of a lifestyle change, that was usually like the doctor would be like, here, I can't do this. Will you help me help them? Right.
So you're getting my wheel spinning on a couple things because first of all, I just want to say this. I was maybe we talked about this or not, I can't remember, but I was kind of going down a similar path as you, wanting to get into medicine. I was hyper focused on being a physician, and I had a shift with a professor. It was a cardiovascular class. And the professor said, what we do is preventative, and what doctors are doing is they're prescribing. So we don't get the limelight. And that's fine. But I also think that the gap has to be filled. And I think we're a long way from it, because looking at what you're doing, where you're here and you're doing these things with clients, most of them don't have this thought in their head. Like when they go to a physician, kind of paralleling some of the conversation you're saying, like they don't have the time. Physicians don't have the time to spend with their clients or patients. And they don't. But I think another component of that is the physicians also, some of them are not healthy themselves, and they also don't know what maybe needs to be done. They don't know what type of activities, from a broad perspective, they do, but maybe not specifically what the clients or patients might need to be eating. And that's step one. And then the type of activities they should be doing. And then beyond that is, just you talking kind of triggered this thought in my head from when I was in college. And I remember going to the hospital for something. I can't remember what it was for, but I was there and I would see all of these nurses and physicians outside smoking. And I'm just thinking to myself, how is this? How is this working?
Kills me. That kills me.
Yeah. So obviously your reason for moving into this space to get in and help is really a personal reason.
Yeah.
I mean, it was triggered for that purpose. And I think for a lot of people, they either do something because you're trying to solve a personal problem, or trying to get some gratification out of something that you recognize in your own life or someone else's, and or you're solving a true need where something, and you're doing both in this scenario. But the problem that I continue seeing is you're in this position, and at the end of the day, you got to make money. And I think a lot of these coaches and trainers, I've said this before, that they get into this and they think that they're going to, they see an advertisement like on Indeed or Career Builder or something to that effect, and they can get compensated $30 an hour, $40 an hour, $50 or $60 an hour, and they happen to love to exercise, and so they go, man, I can not only exercise, but I can get paid for it being with clients, telling them what to do. And I think there's a gap there for them understanding what it really takes, because you went into this with this fire burning, going, I'm going to make a change. I'm going to fill that gap between physician and behavioral change. I'm going to be there for that. But then you have these others who have a true, genuine interest in fitness, and they want to make money out of it, but they don't know how to. They step in. You didn't have any kind of framework. You didn't have any steps when you got into this. So what advice can you give, or what, I guess, top 3 steps or 3 things, looking back on it now, what 3 things would you tell a person kind of like you who's got this fire burning, and they go, I want to really make a change in people's lives. I want to, break that behavioral pattern and get them to be healthier. I want to fill that gap or fill a need, but I also need to make money because I got to pay rent and I have all these other expenses in my life. What would you tell them to do so that way they can kind of go from zero to hero, making some money, right, and living what they want to live in the way that they want to live? What would you say? Like, what are the top 3 things looking back on it?
I mean, if people plan to do it from like a personal service side, which is where I would say, I mean, exercise videos have been around forever. Mm-hmm. Online programming has a place, it has value, but what you find there is you find that you don't get a lot of continuity. You don't get a lot of buy-in with who you are as a brand, right? You'll get people who want to try yours and then they'll go try somebody else's. So from like a personal service side, understanding your why. If you just like to exercise and you think that being in the fitness industry is going to allow you all of this free time to exercise, I would tell you don't do it. Go take a bunch of classes, go get a job somewhere else that will afford you the ability to exercise, because we work when others don't. Mm-hmm. I spent years, my days would be 5 a.m. until, let's say, I would be busy until about noon. I'd have a little break. And then I would start again at 3 p.m. And sometimes I would go to 7 if I was doing training with any athletic facilities. It was that like 7. Sometimes I would work until 10 o'clock at night. You have to be willing to do the things that other people are not. And so many people come into the fitness industry and they're like, I want to work from 9 a.m. until 2 p.m. and then I want to have this free time. You'll never make any money that way, right? Not to afford any kind of life, especially not if you have the overhead of a gym or a brick and mortar facility, because the overhead, the insurance, all of the expenses that go along with it, your advertising, your website, any of the tools that you use, let's say whatever you think you need to make, add 30% to that, and then add in what you want to make. And that turns into your training revenue, your training numbers, right?
Okay. So let's break that down.
Yeah.
Because I think that's critical. So you have a facility, you have the idea of going out and getting equipment, whether you buy it and it's leased or it's purchased through a loan or it's, just bought out of pocket. Now you have your lease with your brick and mortar facility. Okay. You're renting a commercial space and there's a cost associated with that. You have, I'm assuming you pay electric and you pay, utility bills. And then probably internet, right? And then
there's have all state licensures, right?
What was that one again? I barely heard it. I covered
state license, right? So I have to have a studio license through the state on top of the rent, on top of, so we have, I'm paying money to all sorts of different governing bodies that money's not doing anything for me. It's to have a certificate that says, yes, you have a studio, right?
Yeah. And I remember in one of our first conversations, because in some other states where I've worked out of and had studios, they didn't require some of the things that Florida requires. And there's a requirement on the agreement length on how long someone can have an agreement for personal training, correct? And that's 90 days?
No, actually, if people pay us for a service that would be over 30 days, there's different types of bonding. We have to have certain phrases based off of statutes from the state. We have to have those phrases in our contract agreements. And so we're not technically supposed to sell anything that lasts over 30 days. And that's where you get into, okay, if you're doing this many sessions a month, this is how we budget that out.
Okay.
Right.
So if you're listening, other states, you might be fine. Okay. Check with your state in your local municipality, because I don't even know, maybe a municipality can kind of throw something in there. But looking at this high level, right? You want to earn, let's say, because 6 figures today is nothing for most people. So most people got to be beyond that just $100,000 mark. They got to be into that $120,000, $150,000, $200,000 annually, especially if they have a family. So looking at that, knowing what you want to earn and knowing kind of like forecasting out into the future, okay, you're going to be in this industry for, let's say, 10 years before you exit. I think that's one thing that I learned that I didn't know early on, was like having a true exit strategy. But going through that, what can they expect to earn? Like, you don't have to give me numbers, but you can certainly give me a percentage. Like your operating costs if you spend if you had $100 come in, your operating cost takes up, let's say 50% of that. I don't know what the number is for you.
It could be anywhere from 50 to 70% of that, right?
Okay. And that includes, when I say operating, does that include your staff too?
So adding in staff is a whole different ballpark. If I was talking to like the solopreneur who was like, oh, I just want a space to train my people. And let's say they wanted to pay themselves $50,000 a year, right? Like $50,000 turns into like $75,000, right? Because you have like the tax money. And then you have whatever overhead on top of that, right? Like having a staff is completely different. And most gym owners do 1099 contractors.
Which could get you in trouble, by the way, if you're
in that very gray area. I don't recommend it, because if somebody is providing you the tools to do your job, they're providing you with the branding, the clients are paying them, like technically you're an employee. So that's where that other side, like as a gym owner, it would be cheaper for me to 1099 my trainers.
Yeah.
Because
I failed in that area once. I'll tell you about that in a second.
That, other areas have been cracking down on it. Like government officials would walk into like a Pilates studio and they'd be like, how do you get paid? Do the clients pay you? And then the next thing you know, like the studio is having to close its doors. Here's the back taxes that you owe from an employment end.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was what hit me, and it hit me hard. So we had, and this all just goes from advice. Like when I first started, again, young and dumb. And, I thought I knew everything. I was very eager. I wanted to get after everything. And I remember we started off, we pushed forward. We were doing really well. Within the first year, we were over $1 million in revenue. And then we, doubled that the next year, so on and so forth. So I hired a attorney, and it was just like kind of the run-of-the-mill attorney who didn't really have experience in tax law. It was just kind of like contracts, and he was inexpensive, and I had no experience really working with attorneys. And I hired an accountant that had worked in other areas of business. I remember sitting down and doing our chart of accounts, and I had to explain really how our business worked, right? So if you have 10 sessions and you don't use all 10 sessions, what happens next year, right? So if you had 10 sessions in December, do those sessions roll over in January? And is that money that was paid for those sessions, can that client reclaim that money if they did like a chargeback or return, or they asked for a refund? So the way that they handled the accounts, the chart of accounts for that, I didn't know any of that stuff. And I was advised to have by the attorney that everybody could be 1099. So I did that. And after 2 years, I had to pay back taxes, and my back taxes were $250,000. So it just crushed me that year, because I'm going, man, what the hell? Like,
I know our employment taxes just annually, I mean, our employment taxes are in that like $125,000 ballpark.
Yep.
Sometimes higher. But I mean, if I had to guesstimate, and that's not for us, right? I look at that, I'm like, I could do a lot with that money, right? Like what can we do with that money? But there's the cost of doing business. Like that is an inherent cost of doing business. And that's not something that I thought about whenever I opened, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
would you have done it differently? Like when you first opened, would you have been like, look for space that's smaller, or negotiate my lease a little stronger, or, price my training sessions higher, pay my staff lower? Like,
I would have implemented annual increases to the cost of training. That was something I wasn't taking into consideration. It was like, oh, my clients are paying at the time, I think it was like in that $50, $55,
right.
$60 an hour thing. My clients are paying this. I mean, that's a good price. And then I would just eat the 3% increase on rent every single year, the increase in taxes. And I'm like, well, wait a second, like my margins are getting weird. I would have implemented a price increase that reflected what our overhead increase was. I would have created operating procedures sooner, right? Like employee manuals, employee handbooks, because at the time I started, I was just this force, right? I was like, yes, I'm going to take on the world. I'm going to help everybody. I'm going to give people access to it. I mean, that was in 2005. So 2006, 2007, the business was growing. 2008, the market tanked. That forced me into group sessions, right? I would have planned a little bit better on some of that stuff. Fortunately, I'm mentally and emotionally flexible enough to adapt. But I mean, I saw businesses closing left and right because people's discretionary income, which is what we fall into, the money that they don't have to spend, they choose to spend it. And that's based off of the relationship that we build, the results that they get, and then turning into that thing that they need to have in their life versus an expense that can come and go. Or
so I want to hit on something there real quick.
Yeah.
You hit it hard, which is, I think a lot of business owners, I should say it this way. I know a lot of business owners aren't doing it this way, and you have to plan for it. And it's every single year, naturally, if you have a space that you're renting, you have your escalator on your rent, right? Typically it's that 2 to 3% range. If it's higher than that, you probably want to talk to your landlord, see if you can renegotiate. But it's set for that at 2 to 3% because the real estate companies are expecting the market to shift and have this growth rate. And that's natural, right? The economy changes, and there's always this increase in cost of living, increase in expenses that you should see. If that's the case, then naturally what you want to have is if your rent alone is going up 2 to 3%, you're probably going to see it in your phone bill, okay, on the tax side. You're going to see it in your taxes. You're going to see it in other areas, even just going to the grocery store and buying eggs. I remember when eggs were like 49 cents. They're like, you can't buy eggs for less than $6 for a dozen. Right. So you look at this, your cost of living is increasing. If you're not increasing the cost that you charge for training, then you're losing money every year, year over year. until you wither away to nothing. You can be the least expensive training studio in the area, and yeah, you might have a lot of clients, but now you're working, 168 hours a week, which doesn't even exist for you, 24 hours a day.
That would be my other advice. Like, don't compete with people who are directly in your market, right? Like, that is one of the things that I would say I did well. I'm very proud of myself for it. I kept my blinders on. I was like, I don't care what the gym down the road is charging, right? Like, if you'd like to go there, you're welcome to, right? I know what I bring to the table. You're welcome to have an experience with me, have an experience with somebody else. People aren't your property, possessions, right? If they want to train with another trainer, go for it. Most of the time they come back, right? Like, there's that side, but I didn't fall into that trap. Or even, let's say, whenever all of the Orange Theories, F45s, burn boot camps, like all of that stuff that pops up, I have seen so many trends go in and out. Like, the amount of times that I've seen spin in the last 18 years, the spin studios open and close.
Hey, Jazzercise is still around.
Right. Well, it's that ebb and flow of it, right? Yeah, like, it's something that wasn't trend, and then it was gone, and then it was back, and then it's in and out. I don't need to compete with them, right? Like, my brand, the standard that we function under, the values that I take with me from, like, the integrity side of it, that's what I lead first with, inspiring my team to get on board, but also still having enough autonomy to have their own space within my brand, right? Like, they can have their own personality, and we don't have to compete with anybody else, right? There's enough business to go around. People are always going to need fitness.
Have you seen your business? Because my longest tenure was 12 years, directly in owning businesses and locations and all that stuff, and employing a lot of people. I don't have the tenure that you have. So have you seen over these years, because of the trends, and, I remember when CrossFit came out, I wouldn't say came out. I just remember they had a website, and people would do the workout of the day from that website. And then it turned into this, movement. And that's shifted a little bit. I think there's fewer of those things happening, more kind of like a combined CrossFit style studio, like other gyms are implementing that CrossFit style training. And then you have, so that's evolved. Then you have the F45s, the Orange Theories, the Fit Body boot camps, these facilities that have either limited equipment or no equipment really at all. And they're doing this training. And then you have, there's a Spartan, not Spartan races, but it's like Spartan training or Spartan boot camps.
Yeah, it's like the SGX, I think is what they're calling it.
Yeah. So, and they'll like rent out, football fields, and you go and train there with a group of people. What happens in the personal training realm? Because I remember having this idea at one point. I didn't implement it very well, or it wasn't working for the model that we were running at the time. But we decided we're running one-on-one training. Okay. We were closing about 40% of the people that we saw on average. And, the good clubs were closing like 60, 70, 80%. But across the board, 40% were closing on personal training. And we're going, how can we capture that other 60% and get people healthy? Because we were operating out of health clubs. And that 60%, they just buy a membership. They would meet with a trainer, spend a little time with them, and then they would just kind of go on their own way. And next year was the same story, right? Hey, yeah, I saw you last year and you haven't changed. Nothing's changed for you. How do we get that 60% in? And so we started implementing group style training to try and reduce the cost per head. And it ended up doing okay, but it killed our one-on-one sales. So all we did was just take from here and then move this here. So we just balanced it out. Like, our revenue didn't change much. So are you seeing when you implement group that it just balances things out? Or are you seeing by implementing group, you actually have a true increase in your total revenue?
So we've had an increase, but I think what happens is early on, I identify with the client, like what their priorities are, right? Like, our screening process, I talk to them about how much money they want to spend, right? And then I explained to them the difference in between group, because a lot of personal training studios were like, oh, you get the benefit of a personal trainer, but it's in a small group, so you don't have to pay as much.
Right.
But if I'm training 6 people, I can't spot 6 people. So how can I progressively overload? How can I actually apply the science of what we do? So if some people are like, hey, I need a mixture of like one-on-one and group, right? Or let's say they can only afford 1 person private training session, they may be able to add in another 2 groups. So they're still getting some progressive overload, and then they're able to complement that with additional training, right? From a group side.
That works for new clients, but what about the clients that you already have? Right?
Our clients don't typically jump from one to the other.
Okay.
It's very rare. If anything, we would see somebody from group training who might want a little bit of an extra something, right? They may want an experience that's solely focused on them.
Okay.
And so we can upsell some of the group people. We typically don't have people going from like a one-on-one private session to our groups. For them,
it's kind of like a downgraded experience.
Yeah. And I mean, the experience from our group side, it's great, but it's not that connection. We offer, like with our private clients, we stretch them at the end of their session. So there are certain things that we do that provide that extra special experience, to lack of a better word, right? It's a more special experience, but they're paying for that time and that experience, and they're willing to pay for that.
How long?
Because they bring value. So the hard work of training, probably in that like 45, 50 minute space. And then we'll stretch them for 5 or so minutes afterward. So most of our sessions, right, people book our hour. And then, but I mean, if somebody could keep training after they're finished with their session, most people are really excited for the stretch, because that means that they've finished.
Time to lay down and relax.
We also don't have clocks.
I like that.
We don't have clocks anywhere. I had a client get really upset about it years ago. They bought me probably 15 clocks, and I put them in the bathrooms. I would set them on the wrong times. I would put them in the offices. I never put them in the gym. So
I like that.
I've been a little bit more stubborn in that sense, because I tell people, the second you walk in the door, you're mine, right? Like, your time is now ours, but it's solely focused on you. You don't need to worry about what you have to do next. You don't need to worry about where you're going. We know what time it is. So
that's good.
Some people get mad about it, but it's okay.
Hey, they're in your space now.
Yeah. I did the whole Mean Marie thing that happened, honestly. So
I want to jump into pricing and how you compensate. So I think for anybody who's starting, like, one of the first questions, they'll put together spreadsheets and stuff and try and figure this out on paper. It looks good on paper. What's the pricing? Like, what would you charge for training? There's a range there, right?
Yeah. So I would say for our private training, our lowest end is going to be still in that $55 to $60 range.
Okay. How do you determine that? Is it based on trainer experience, who you're giving them with? Is it based on number of sessions that they're buying? So
we do have different tiers for our trainers, because that's the other side, right? I don't want to say the person who's just out of school.
Mm-hmm. They're all educated and qualified. It's just
right. They're educated and qualified, but they don't have the practical application experience. Some of the tips and tools that we learn going through it, like how to create a client experience, right? Mm-hmm. And so the people who are newer in my facility, they take more of my time to coach them, to teach them our brand standard. And so I have to look at like their time and the value of that time in comparison to somebody who's been with me for 12, 15 years, right? Or somebody who has higher levels of education and the experience, right? So we have a tiered structure, and I would say our sessions range for private on the low end, that 55, and that comes along with a commitment, right? Like, people are saying, yeah, I'm going to come in 3 times a week. I'm going to commit to X time period. And if I don't use these sessions, I lose them, right? And that's to get the very the lowest rate that they can on that private training.
Okay.
If people want flexibility, and let's say they want to buy a package of 12 sessions and use it as they would like to use it, that costs more. They pay for the flexibility of it because people travel,
Okay.
right? And if they want their spot held, ready, available, open, their cost per hour is higher. So I would say that starts in like the 65 and up range there.
Okay. So there's you have like a matrix of tiers based on trainer qualifications, how long they've been in the industry, based on the client purchasing a certain number of sessions, or based on their flexibility or what they're looking for. So,
and there's also the supply and demand side, right? Like I have a couple of staff who would have a waiting list, right?
okay. So they're a little more expensive.
So their time, in my mind, from that, because they're providing a client experience that the clients are like, yes, I want this, I want this, I want this. That's that supply and demand side, which from a service-based industry, people think about, well, what are your rates? And it's like, I mean, that depends, right? Like,
yeah. So
and
what's your blended rate? Do you have a blended rate?
Blended being?
Look at it over the course of an entire year and you go, okay, my average rate blended across all trainers in all sessions is this number.
I would say that's probably in the $75, $80 an hour range.
Okay.
If I blended it.
Okay. And is it okay if I ask we can cut it too. I mean, it doesn't matter. What the percentage for the trainer typically is, what their blended is, like where they land. So
I've got a few of my trainers are on salary.
Okay.
So that they get a consistent paycheck regardless if their schedule is full or not. And let's say...
Is that a dangerous move? Like starting out, is that a dangerous move?
It is something that if a trainer is not pulling the revenue to cover that cost, so let's say somebody has a $60,000 a year salary, their cost, including our overhead, including all of that other, I need them to produce minimally $88,000 a year to cover what they cost me as an employee. Mm-hmm. Right.
And then you make nothing. So, that's just, you make nothing off of that as a business owner.
Right. And that's the other side where it's like, is it a risky move? Yeah. There have been a few people that I put on a salary too soon. And I was like, ooh, okay, because I feel like I'm making an investment and I like to see a return on that investment. So starting trainers off at an hourly, I mean, I look at a multiplier, right? Like if I'm paying somebody a flat hourly rate, I usually apply that by like a 1.4. And that gives me an approximation of their cost from a tax standpoint, from some of our overhead. And then I think about what number I need to generate profit, right? Okay. So most trainers are like, oh, they look at the session price and then they look at what they're making per hour. And they're like, well, I'm around like 50%. And whenever I 1099 people, I would pay people 60%, but I'm like, I'm not paying taxes on you. And I still think that was pretty gracious, right? So the hardest part is most business structures say that your payroll should be in that like 30% of your overhead cost or 30% of your gross revenue. Our payroll is far higher than that. So I do it because I know that my trainers are taking care of our clients and our clients are the ones who pay the business. My accountant doesn't like it so much because he thinks about like the bigger profit margin. But again, I have other things in mind. And my role as the business owner is to take care of the people who are taking care of our clients. Yeah, I wanted to,
because we're running out of time here, but I want to step into what you're talking about here, which is probably your coaching. Those are the other things in your mind, I'm imagining, or at least one of the other things.
Yeah.
Talk about how you went from, sorry, but I just have to preface this because people get into this training world and they go, all right, I love this. I want to get in this. I'm in this now. I had to figure out how to get my first couple clients and now things are moving. And then I hire some people. I'm still working, 15-hour days. And then I finally get to a point and I'm like, I'm still working 12-hour days and I'm still training clients. how do I get out of this cycle? How do I start living? Because I didn't think this is what it was going to be. I'm making good money, but I can't even spend it because I'm never around to spend it. So it's just, I'm making it, I'm investing it, which is great. But at some point I want to transition into something different, or I want to have an exit strategy and I don't have one. How do you go from what you're doing now? Okay, you've done all this stuff. You've transitioned over, and now you're in a position where you're able to actually take all this knowledge, all your wins and all your failures, and apply them for other business owners. So how did you make that switch? Because that's a hard switch to make when you've been doing this for 2 decades.
That was about, so April will be 18 years since I opened my brick and mortar. And then May will be 2 years since I had a traumatic spine injury. So I got kind of forced into mine. I was trying to figure out the magic ratio of how many hours I should be training versus managing the business. And for me, the back injury forced me to stop. And I knew that I was a limiting factor for our growth, but I didn't know how much until I was no longer servicing clients directly. And that was a very humbling thing because I love doing it. I'm very good at doing it. But the other side of it is my time is spent better. So this transition into the coaching world, I would take the knowledge and experience and all of that time because I had no time. I was making plenty of money. My training revenue was ridiculous, but I had no time. Mm-hmm. And that no time means you can't enjoy this thing that you've built or spend all of your time and passion doing because you've got money, but no time, right?
Have you seen a decline in revenue because you kind of stepped away?
No.
That's good.
No.
That's really good.
No. I saw an increase. That was the humbling part is whenever I was forced out of training because of my injury and had to have surgery, I saw a revenue increase and I was like, ooh, like I knew I was a limiting factor for our growth, but I didn't realize it was that bad. The ego took a hit on it when it was kind of an identity crisis.
Takes you down a couple notches, right?
I paid my therapist a lot of money to work through that one. But the way that I'm doing it with the other, like, let's say if I'm coaching an independent trainer, or if I'm coaching another trainer who has a business model that is similar, or even another service-based business, right? Whether it's a massage therapist, is understanding the value of their time, how they're spending their time, and then what it looks like to, I would say, increase the value of the time that they're spending with clients. So that could be like an increasing rates. And then how to maximize the time that they're not spending in those like $100 tasks.
You have an example of maybe without providing the name of the client that you've worked with, of kind of what you've done, like how you've taken whatever it was that was holding them back for growth, or just whether that be monetary or personal, and then move them ahead by you being able to be that second set of eyes and mind to go in and here you go. This is what you got to work on.
I think breaking it down, teaching them how to understand what the value of their clients, like each client that walks through the door has an inherent value or lifespan. Mm-hmm. And most gym owners or most businesses, some of the ones that I've worked with, don't understand the value of the life of their client, right? They know what they're getting per hour. They don't think about the client as like the client journey. So helping them understand that side. And then teaching them tools and strategies for like the marketing side, right? Like that's a huge piece. Understanding who your target market is. Not everybody is our ideal client. Other one would be how to leverage your time and pay somebody else to give you time and freedom that can increase your revenue structure. Right.
You learned that one quickly, didn't you?
Yes. Right. Like whenever I started hiring people, it was because the business forced me to do so, because it was growing at a rate that I couldn't handle as a single person. Right. So I was like, ooh, I need to hire somebody, and ooh, I need to hire somebody else. And then, oh my God, I need to hire. And the business constantly forced me to hire. And if I can teach other business owners, like there have been a couple that I've worked with, how to understand how to hire whenever they're on the verge of that upswing, because it's like, that if you build it, they will come. Right.
Yeah. That would be nice. Always.
Yeah. But a lot of people wait too long to hire, or they're unwilling to turn over, say like I hire somebody. when do I turn over a role that I'm doing well? And let's say I'm closing 100% of the clients that I'm seeing for consultations. When do I turn that, like, pass the torch? It's whenever somebody can close approximately 60 to 70% of what you can. Mm-hmm. You put that on them. You say, hey, you know what? You're doing great. Here you go. I don't need to be in control of this, right? And most of us as business owners, the ones that I've been working with, are trying to be involved in every single moving part, but we only have so much time in a day, right? And so teaching the other owners, right, like one that I'm coaching right now, I'm teaching her how to understand where she's spending her time and what the value of each bit of that time is. So it's kind of like a personal training, but from like the business side, because I look at like her specific needs, what her goals are.
Yeah, it's like breaking down the weight loss that your client wants within a period of time. How long is it going to take you to get there? Mm-hmm. But now doing it with someone who's looking at their business and breaking their revenue down backwards.
Well, and then you create the action items, right? Like these are the things that you're going to implement in the next 30, 60, 90 mm-hmm. days.
Yeah.
Here's one that's going to focus on revenue. Here's one that's going to focus on your brand awareness, right? Because people need to know you, trust you, buy you, like that entire thing.
I think that business owners who've been also a coach for, like in the fitness industry, business owners who've been in the fitness industry as a coach and they've had to work with other employees or staff members, they have that natural ability to work with other business owners and do the coaching because they've been doing it for so long, right? You're always coaching people, and taking it and applying it in another business, especially service-based business, it's an immediate parallel. There's not a whole lot that gets lost.
I don't need to make a wheel every time I have an idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, where can everyone find you, Marie? I mean, you've got two businesses now. You've got your fitness business, and you also have your coaching business. And I know that I always love talking with you, and I always learn something when I speak with you. Where can other people connect with you so that way they can learn and have conversations like this and see if there's an opportunity for them to work with you?
I mean, if they can have my cell phone number. That is the easiest way to get in touch with me, right?
You know this is going out to the world, right? Your personal.
Right. If they get creepy, I block them. Like I have hard boundaries there. But my coaching website, it's mariemerrittcoaching.com. Very simple, straightforward. That's it, right? The fitness industry, that's getmomentumfit.com. And then from a cell phone perspective, if people really want it, if you think it's a bad idea, I won't put it out there.
No, put it out there. We'll see what happens.
All right. My cell phone is 904-504-9894.
Awesome. You heard it here first, everyone, with Marie Merritt. She is awesome, very inspirational. She's done a lot, and we didn't even cover or touch the surface on many, many other things. So I expect to hope having you back next time on another show. Marie, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time today, and I look forward to another show in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks.